In the world of motorcycles, there are a few styles that are more iconic than the cafe racer. This slick, stripped-down version of a motorcycle was forged by enthusiasts for one reason: speed. Now, there was no one model called a cafe racer. Rather, it was a movement among bikers that got its start in the 1950s and 1960s across the pond in the UK. And some 70 years later, they still remain as a mainstay subculture within the motorcycle space. And this is how the cafe racers of yesteryear came to be. And it all started, funny enough, in the cafes of England, hence the name cafe racer. Now, in America and England alike, the leather jacket and rock and roll subculture of motorcycle owners, particularly among men, was in full force. And in England, with their bustling motorcycle manufacturing industry pumping out a variety of performance bikes, from Triumph to Norton and Vincent, there were plenty of options for people to get into a motorcycle that wouldn't break the bank. But once the taste of speed was acquired, everyone wants to do whatever they can to get more of it. Modifying your motorcycle into a cafe racer was almost akin to the hot rodding culture in America when it came to cars, where essentially everything was par for the course to be changed. From a visual perspective, the look that most cafe racer builds would go for would be something inspired by the racing bikes of the day, much like the ones that you would see ripping down the Isle of Man and other famous racing destinations. To get a more lightened and stripped down version of their bikes, cafe racer owners would swap out fuel tanks and other steel parts for lighter aluminum versions, while also putting on lower sets of handlebars and rear pegs to give the bike a much more race-inspired, low-slung look than it would have came with from the factory. This consistent series of modifications across the board gave birth to a unique look in the cafe racer type of motorcycle that has stood the test of time. But it wasn't just the exterior that was modified. Remember, these bikes couldn't be all show and no go. They had to be quick to keep up with each other, even in friendly competition. Larger carburetors, new exhaust systems, and other internal motor work would be part of the norm if you were trying to squeeze more power out of your cafe racer build. But some even took it a step further, fully swapping engines even across manufacturers into their build to try and boost power when needed. With cafe racers, it was much less about brand loyalty, being, a Triumph guy or a Norton guy. It was much more about the camaraderie and personalization of the build. But now that you know exactly what made up a cafe racer build and why they have the name associated with them, we need to go over why this entire movement within the motorcycle world is so special. Cafe racers weren't just, cars and coffee for modified motorcycles, going cafe to cafe. No, they were much more than that. With the combination of the rock and roll craze and love for speed, these cafes that the cafe racer crowd frequented became a true place of brotherhood amongst riders. People would go to their cafe of choice that their group was at and socialize. And then when it was time to leave and head off to a different cafe, this was when everybody would all get on their home-built bikes and race from Cafe A to Cafe B. But this racing wasn't for pink slips or large pools of cash. It was more about racing for respect and for the sport. Think of it more as gentlemen's racing, where at the end there was no gain other than a head nod from the other guy you just beat. As a cultural phenomenon, the cafe racer craze grew and grew in popularity, with lots of evolutions happening to the bikes over the years. When the Japanese bikes burst onto the scene in the 70s, their performance potential made them a great new option to build a cafe racer on outside of the norm of the British bikes. The affinity for cafe racers got so high, in fact, that it even reached the top brass at various motorcycle manufacturers, who responded to the craze by releasing some of their own turnkey cafe racers, such as the Harley-Davidson XLCR and the Honda GB500 TT. Soon other manufacturers like BMW and even Moto Guzzi would go ahead and release their own turnkey cafe racers. By the 80s and 90s, the cafe racer craze, and really its link to being a mainstay in pop culture, was fading. Everyone still loved these motorcycles and the style and speed that they provided, but the rock and roll era itself was beginning to fall out of its heyday. But because of how iconic and frankly how cool the cafe racer bikes built in the era looked, while that era of rock and roll mixed with cafe racing itself was gone, the actual style of the bikes and their own DNA lived on all the way until the present day. Thousands of people each and every year are still embarking on their own journey of building their own cafe racer style bike, harkening back to the bikes of the 60s. And major manufacturers to this day are still offering turnkey cafe racer style motorcycles because people around the world still are in love with the bikes from this era and what they represent. So I ask you this question in conclusion. If you had just one bike to build your dream cafe racer upon, what would you choose? Comment down below your answer. But that is the brief history of how cafe racers came to be. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate it if you could drop a like and also share this video with other enthusiasts. Also, please make sure that you are subscribed to the Rare Motorcycles YouTube channel and smash that notification bell for more documentary style videos just like this on the world's most interesting motorcycles. Until next time, enthusiasts.